Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The topic today is hepatitis C, and in today's lecture we will be talking mainly about its epidemiology, virology, briefly about its life cycle and pathogenesis, transmission, and then clinical manifestations. Hepatitis C is a global burden. This is a problem not only for Pakistan but also for whole of the world. According to WHO estimate, about 180 million people they are infected with hepatitis C virus at present, and it accounts for 3% of the total world population. Although there is significant decrease in the incidence of acute cases, but still 3 to 4 million people they become infected with hepatitis C virus annually throughout the world. And the prevalence of this hepatitis C virus is about 5 times as compared to the HIV, which is considered to be a dreadful disease in the Europe. It is a significant effect on the overall morbidity and mortality, and according to an estimate, 350,000 to 500,000 people they die every year from hepatitis C, its related complications like the end-stage liver disease, the liver failure, and the hepatocellular carcinoma. As I said, it is a global problem, and it is one of the top health problem in many African countries. The highest prevalence of hepatitis C in the world is in Egypt, where according to a rough estimate the prevalence is 14.5%, and in one of the previous estimate this prevalence was around about 20%, and it is suggested perhaps the campaign for eradication of schistosomiasis with antimony injections is perhaps responsible for this high prevalence of hepatitis C in the Egypt. It is also very common in Asian countries, and the second highest prevalence is found in Pakistan, where about 5 to 7% of the total Pakistani population is either active carrier or a patient of hepatitis C virus. The other Asian countries like India, Japan, Malaysia, Philippines, and other countries of the Far East, they also have a significantly high prevalence of hepatitis C virus. The story of hepatitis C virus discovery and nomenclature is interesting. Initially, the hepatitis was categorized as infective hepatitis or serum hepatitis, and then later on the infective hepatitis was given the name hepatitis A, and serum hepatitis was given the name of hepatitis B. In 1965, when the Australia antigen was discovered, and later on the DNA particle was discovered in Australian population, and this was basically identified in a serum of patient with hepatitis B. So this virus was given the name of hepatitis B virus. In 1973, hepatitis A virus was isolated from the stools of a patient with infectious hepatitis or hepatitis A, and after this discovery of hepatitis A and hepatitis B, there was a new category of non-A, non-B hepatitis, because it was evident that there are a number of patients who are a patient of hepatitis, chronic hepatitis, but they don't fit into hepatitis A or B. So this non-A, non-B hepatitis nomenclature was introduced, and later on it was found that this group of non-A, non-B hepatitis consists of 2 types of the viruses. And in 1989, the one virus which has feature very similar to hepatitis B, which was transmitted through the parental route, and it also has got propensity to become chronic, was discovered, and this was given the name of hepatitis C virus. And before that, hepatitis E virus also has been isolated. So this completed the nomenclature and alphabet of the hepatitis viruses. This hepatitis C virus, it is a RNA virus. It is linear. It consists of a single strand of positive sense RNA, and it contains 9600 nucleotide. This belongs to the family of Flaviviridae, and in this family of Flaviviridae there are 4 genera, and the hepatitis C belong to the genera of Hep C virus. In addition, there are 3 other genera in this category, and they are the flaviviruses like dengue virus and yellow fever virus, pestiviruses, and pagiviruses. The genome of hepatitis C virus, it contains a single large open reading frame, and that codes for virus polyprotein, and the virus polyprotein consists of about 3000 amino acids, and this is cleaved after translation to yield 10 viral proteins, and we will discuss the significance of these individual viral proteins later on. And this is a simple diagrammatic structure of the hepatitis C virus. The approximate size is 60 nanometer. It contains the RNA as its genome, and this is surrounded by the core antigen, and then you have the envelope antigen E1 and E2, and they are again surrounded by a lipid layer which is of the cellular origin. And this is the diagram and sketch of the linear viral structure and its various proteins. It is RNA virus, and it consists of a single open reading frame, and it has got 2 fixed regions at its both ends, which are known as non-translated regions. One is the 5' non-translated region, the other is 3' non-translated regions, and in between these 2 fixed regions we have 2 types of proteins, the structural proteins and the non-structural proteins. Total there are 10 proteins, and out of these 10 proteins, 3 are structural proteins which are integral part of the virus structure, and they consist of the core protein and then 2 envelope proteins E1 and E2, and then we have 7 non-structural proteins. And some of the authorities, they consider that the P7, it may be one of the structural proteins. So according to this classification, there are 4 structural proteins: C, E1, E2 and P7, and then we have 6 or 7 non-structural proteins. The non-structural proteins are in the form of various enzymes and various complexes. They play integral role in the virus replication and completion of its life cycle. If we consider the P7 as a non-structural protein, this is then non-structural protein 1, NS1, and then we have NS2 and the non-structural protein NS3, and then NS4 is divided into 2 components, 4A and 4B, and similarly the non-structural protein 5 is again divided into 2 components, NS5A and NS5B. And this is about the functions and role in the life cycle and multiplication of the various proteins in the hepatitis C virus life cycle. And these proteins and these important structures, they provide the basis for the therapeutic interventions, and the current available drugs, the so-called directly acting antivirals, they act on various proteins and various enzymes which are represented by these non-structural proteins. The exact role of NS2 is not very clear, but it is a transmembrane protein and plays important role in virus adhesions and its onward transmissions. The NS3, it behaves as proteases, and this requires a component of NS4A as a cofactor to complete its activity. So NS3-4A, they are cysteine and serine protease inhibitors, and the first class of the oral drugs, they belong to this protease inhibitors like the boceprevir and talaprevir. The NS4B, it has again a not very clear-cut functions. It behaves as cofactors, and NS5A, it is associated with replications, and this is replication complex, and its inhibitors in the form of various tasvir like the declatasvir and the velpatasvir, they are the basic component of the current regimes of directly acting antivirals. And NS5B is the polymerase enzyme, and its inhibitors like sofosbuvir, they again are integral component of the regime of the directly acting antivirals. Another important feature of this hepatitis C virus is its genetic diversity, and on the basis of its genetic variations and diversity, there are major 6 genotypes, and recently another genotype 7 has also been identified. And again, each of the genotype consists of several subtypes, and there are about 50 subtypes. So there are major 6 genotypes and 50 subtypes on the basis of genetic diversity of this hepatitis C virus. These various genotypes differ from one another in sequence homology by more than 30%, and if the homology in this sequence is more than 20% but less than 30%, then this classifies as a subtype. Another important feature that within each genotype and within each subtype, again the virus is not similar, and in each individuals there are viruses which are genetically different from each other, and the variation may be around about 8 to 10%, and these intragenotypic and intra-subgenotypic differences, they are referred to as quasi-species. So this genotypic and quasi-species diversity of hepatitis C virus, which results from its high mutation rate, and this interferes with effective humoral immunity, and this is one of the main reasons why majority of the infections with hepatitis C virus, they become chronic, and this may also be the reason for individual variation in response and outcome to the treatment of individual persons. The neutralizing antibodies to hepatitis C virus, they have been demonstrated and identified, but they tend to be very short-lived, and SCV infection does not induce a lifelong or a lasting immunity. So again, reinfection with different virus isolates or even the same virus isolate is a strong possibility. And on the basis of this, neither heterologous nor homologous immunity appears to develop after acute hepatitis C virus infections. There is a distinct pattern of the distribution of these genotypes in the world. Some genotypes, they are found in one particular region, the other are found in the other areas. In addition to these geographic distributions, there also are differences among the genotypes in responsive to antiviral therapy. When the interferon was the mainstay of treatment, then genotype 1 was considered to be one of the most difficult genotype to treat, and overall duration of treatment was 48 weeks, whereas for other genotypes most of the time the treatment would be within 24 weeks. But after the discovery of the directly entering antivirals, now the most difficult genotype is genotype 3, which is also associated with more severe hepatic progressions and is also strongly associated with hepatic steatosis. And this shows the worldwide prevalence of various genotypes, like genotype 1A and 1B. They are mainly found in the United States and in the Northern Europe. Genotype V, genotype 2, which is considered to be a simple genotype and easy to treat genotype, is mainly found in America, Europe, Japan and Italy. Genotype 3, which has become now one of the most difficult genotype to treat and has got a poor prognosis and bad outcome, is predominantly seen in the Indian subcontinent, and this is our major genotype, and about 80-85% of our patients, they belong to genotype 3. Genotype 4 is more commonly found in Africa and Middle East, and genotype 5 mainly in South Africa, and genotype 6 is mainly distributed in Southeast Asia and in Hong Kong. And this again shows the distribution of various genotypes in the various regions of the world. And coming to pathogenesis, the virus replicates mainly in the hepatocytes, and it is estimated that daily each infected cell will produce 50 copies of the new virons. In addition to these hepatocytes, the virus also replicates in the peripheral blood mononuclear cells, and this involvement of these mononuclear cells potentially accounts for the high levels of immunological disorders and various types of extrahepatic manifestations which are seen in patients who are chronically infected with hepatitis C virus. Very briefly about the life cycle, because this will help us to demonstrate how the virus propagates itself and causes its manifestations, and moreover the targets for therapeutic interventions, they are based on the various steps of the life cycle which are involved in the multiplications and replication of this virus. The first step is entry of the hepatitis C virus into the host cells, and the envelope proteins E1 and E2, they basically recognize and they bind themselves to specific receptors on the basolateral surface of the hepatocytes, and main receptor is CD81, but this is not only receptors, and number of other factors they are also involved in the attachment of the virus to the surface of the liver cells, which is the first step in the life cycle of this virus. And after its attachment, the virus then enters into the cells through the process of endocytosis, and once it is in the cytoplasm, the virus releases its RNA, and this behaves as messenger RNA, which then undergoes the translation, and after translation the various polyproteins are processed. After this processing of polyproteins, the hepatitis C virus RNA, it replicates and produces multiple copies, and these new viral RNAs are then reassembled. They are packed and they are transported to the surface of the host cells, and then they are released from the host cells, and they are ready to complete the new cycle of the virus. And this is basically the simple diagrammatic representation of various steps which are involved in the life cycle. On the left side you can see the first step is the receptor binding, and then the endocytosis, and after the endocytosis there is then fusion and uncoating with release of this messenger RNA, and this messenger RNA then undergoes translation and polyprotein processing, and then there is replication of the RNA. The new copies, they are assembled together, and then they are released from the surface of the liver cells back into the bloodstream, and now they are ready to complete another life cycle of the virus. Which patient they need screening because of their high risk of getting the hepatitis C infections, and number of patients they are at risk of getting hepatitis C virus, and they must be screened for the presence of the antibodies and the active viral replications. And this list includes the persons who were born between 1945 and 1965, because it was 1965 when this category of non-A, non-B hepatitis was identified, and before that we were not aware of this virus. So these patients who are born between 1945 and 1965, they are at high risk of getting these chronic hepatitis C virus infections, and they must be screened. Another important source is the intravenous drug abuse. So persons who have ever used these IV drugs, they must also undergo screening. Then the HIV infections along with C virus has multiple effects on various steps. The risk of getting chronicity is significantly increased. The overall risk of the liver involvement is also significantly increased, and because of the immunosuppression, the risk of vertical transmission from the mother to the newborn is also significantly high in patients who are HIV co-infected. So these patients must also be subjected to screening. And then the persons who are treated with multiple blood transfusions and clotting factors like hemophilics before the 1987, because after 1987 and early 90s the screening of all the blood products and blood transfusions was mandatory. So now the risk of getting infection with these clotting factors and with the blood and its products is almost very low. Then patients who are having hemodialysis, again they are at high risk because of the multiple factors. So any patient who have ever undergone a long-term hemodialysis must also be subjected to the hepatitis C virus screening. And some of the estimates shows the prevalence of the antibodies may be as high as 70% in chronic hemodialysis patients. Moreover, these patients, they are immunocompromised, so sometimes the anti-HCV may be false negative, and the diagnosis should be based on the estimation of the RNA by PCR method. Any person who has unexplained elevation of aminotransfer level, because this is one of the commonest cause, and the second commonest cause now is the fatty liver disease or NASH, so these patients should also be subjected. And similarly, patients who have received transfusions or transplantation prior to July 1992, when the screening was made mandatory, they also should be subjected to screening. Then the recipients of the blood or the organs from a donor who was found to be hepatitis C virus must also be screened. And then children who are born to women with hepatitis C virus must also be screened. And here one important clinical feature, that the screening of these newborn patients should be with the PCR. because the placental transfer of the antibodies, these antibodies, they persist in the blood for several months, and if the testing is based on simple anti-SCV, then it may be a false positive estimation. So the newborn babies who are born to C positive mother, they should be tested for their infection status with the help of PCR, which is done after 1 month. Then the healthcare, the public safety and emergency medical personnel who had a needle stick injury or mucosal exposure to SCV contaminated blood should also be subjected to screening, and there is a whole process of testing after one gets a needle stick injury. And then the sexual partners of the persons who are having hepatitis C infections, they must also be screened, because the risk of sexual transmission of hepatitis C virus in the men who have sex with men or in the homosexual persons or wrong sexual practices is about 5 to 10%. Various transmission routes. The most effective route of transmission is the parental route, and the various types of parental exposures like transfusion of infected blood or its products, using non-sterile syringes or reusing these syringes, then needles and various medical instruments, transplantation of the infected blood, infected donor organs or tissues, and occupational exposure with the infected blood. All these are various modes of parental transmissions, and they still are a significant route of transmission of the hepatitis C virus. The risk of sexual transmission is actually very low in the stable heterologous sexual partnership. In monogamous partners, the risk is about 2%, and the risk is higher among persons who have multiple sex partners, where the risk becomes almost 2 to 3 folds high, like the commercial sex workers and men who have sex with men, which is now one of the major route of the transmission of C virus in the European countries. Mother to child transmission, the risk of vertical transmission is about 5 to 7%, and the risk is increased if the mother has got very higher viral load, or the mother is HIV infected and gets infection in the last trimester. The delivery through cesarean sections, it does not have a significant effect on the transmission from mother to the child. So spontaneous vaginal delivery or cesarean sections, both they have equal risk of transmission. And after the transmission and after the delivery, the breastfeeding is safe, and there is no risk of transmission of the virus from the mother to the child through the milk. Rather, some of the studies they have shown that the human breast milk has a neutralizing effect on the hepatitis C virus. The common household exposures, like using the same utensils, the towel, hugging, kissing, and other exposures with air, with droplets, with vectors or animals, they are not involved in the transmission of hepatitis C virus. Once a patient is exposed to hepatitis C virus, he becomes a patient of acute hepatitis C virus infections. But majority of these patients, they are asymptomatic. About 2/3 of the patients, they don't have any specific features of this acute illness. So most of the time patient, they're not aware of the illness, and they are diagnosed or they become aware of disease when already they have progressed to the stage of chronicity. In about 1/4 of the patients, the acute hepatitis C may be symptomatic, and in the symptomatic patients, only very small percentage of the patient, they will be clinically jaundiced, and majority of the symptomatic patients, they will be without jaundice. And these symptomatic patients, because they basically involve more aggressive immune response from the host, so the rate of recovery is relatively high, and about 50 to 52% of the patients with symptomatic acute hepatitis, they will show recovery, as compared to only 10 to 15% in those patients who will be asymptomatic. So long term, after acute exposure to hepatitis C virus, spontaneous recovery will be seen in about 15 to 30% of the cases, and 70 to 85% of the patients, they will progress to the chronic infection. And once these patients who become chronic infections, most of the time the progression of the disease is very slow, and if the patient gets infection late in life, most of the time they will not show any manifestations of the liver disease, and most of them will be a just silent patient, and they may be diagnosed on routine screening or investigation for some other reason. And but some of the patients, they will progress to the stage of end stage liver disease. So 20 to 40% of the patients, they will progress to cirrhosis over the course of 20 to 30 years. And those patients who become cirrhotic, about 4 to 5% of the patients, they carry the risk of progressing to hepatocellular carcinoma. Hepatitis C basically is described as a disease of decades. The first decade is the decade of chronic hepatitis. The second decade is decade of cirrhosis, and third decade is the decade of complications like hepatocellular carcinoma. So hepatocellular carcinoma almost always occurs on background of cirrhosis and chronic liver disease. An important question is why majority of the patients with hepatitis C virus, they become chronic. Most of the studies have shown that 70 to 85% of the patients with acute exposure to hepatitis C, they can progress to chronic stage. The exact reason for this very high level of chronicity in hepatitis C virus is not known, but perhaps the ability of hepatitis C virus to escape the immune response of the host may be one of the most important factors. The C virus is RNA virus, and like all other RNA viruses, it is characterized by rapid multiplications, and the proofreading is very weak, so there are permanent changes in its antigenic structure, and these antigenic structure changes, they occur multiple times per minute, and variability of this virus makes the T and B lymphocytes unable to identify and respond to these permanently changed antigens. So very rapid multiplications, very poor proofreading, and high degree of the mutations and permanent changing in the antigenic structure is main factor through which the virus escapes the human immune response, and thus after this escape it becomes chronic in majority of the patients. As I already said, in an individual person, the virus particles, they are not the same. They show some genetic diversity, and this small genetic diversity is the basis for quasi species. So antigenic variations of hepatitis C virus in the same host, which is called quasi species, and number of such quasi species sometime may reach very high, about 10 to power 10 or 10 to power 11 per day. And due to this variability of the hepatitis C virus, time computation between the new antigenic strains and the speed of neutralizing antibody develops. The clinical manifestations, the incubation period is about 15 to 160 days. On average, this is about 7 weeks. And most of the time the patients will show the non-specific constitutional symptoms as we see in other viral hepatitis like anorexia, nausea and vomiting, fatigue, malaise, body aches and pains, headaches, photophobias, pharyngitis, cough and coryza. And these non-specific constitutional symptoms, they may precede the onset of jaundice by 1 to 2 weeks. And once the patient gets liver involvement and the abnormalities of the liver function tests, the urine becomes dark colored, stool becomes clay colored when the patient has progressed to the stage of cholestasis, and these features, they may be noticed by the patient usually after 1 to 5 days before the onset of clinical jaundice. And once the patient becomes clinical jaundice, and remember this jaundice will only appear when the serum bilirubin becomes more than 3 mg per deciliter, the constitutional prodromal symptoms, they usually diminished, but in some patients, patient may get significant constitutional features with weight loss which may be mild to moderate, and this will continue during the entire icteric phase of the disease. With liver inflammation, the liver becomes enlarged and tender, and this may be associated with pain in the right upper quadrant, and sometimes it may be a diffuse discomfort in the upper abdomen. Sometimes the patient may present with features of cholestasis when the conjugated bilirubin becomes very high. The patient gets pruritus, the stool, they become clay colored because of absence of the stercobilinogen, and the urine becomes very dark color, and this is mainly because of the involvement of the intrahepatic biliary passages by the marked swelling of the liver cells. Splenomegaly and cervical lymphadenopathy, they may be present in 10 to 20% of the patients with acute hepatitis, and rarely a few spider angiomas, they may also appear during this icteric phase, but they will disappear during the convalescence, and they are seen in the distribution of superior vena cava. And during the recovery phase, the constitutional symptoms, they disappear, but usually some liver enlargement and abnormalities in liver functions, biochemical abnormalities, they will be evident even in the later stages. The duration of this post-icteric phase is variable, and it may range from 2 to 12 weeks, and sometimes it may be more prolonged. We expect a complete clinical and biochemical recovery in about 3 to 4 months after the onset of jaundice, and this complete recovery is seen in about 3/4 of the patients who have uncomplicated course. Hepatitis C is usually self-limiting in about 15% of the patients, and this is because of the control of the virus by its immune response. But in majority of the patients, the patient will progress to the stage of chronic hepatitis when the viral markers and biochemical abnormalities, they persist beyond 6 months. So demarcation between acute hepatitis and chronic hepatitis is the presence of the viral markers and biochemical abnormalities after the 6 months of onset of the illness. And when we perform the routine laboratory tests during this illness, the complete blood count is usually normal, but there may be transient neutropenia and lymphopenia, and this is later on followed by lymphocytosis. The liver function tests, they are deranged. The unusual abnormality is elevation of the serum transaminases. ALT is elevated more as compared to the AST, but once the patient progresses to the stage of chronicity and especially to the stage of chronic liver disease, then there is gradual elevation of AST as compared to the ALT. The elevation of ALT does not correlate with the underlying liver inflammations, and sometimes the ALT may be totally normal and patient may have severe necroinflammatory changes in the liver. Most of the time the elevation of this ALT is variable, but about 10 to 30 times the upper limit of normal is elevation seen in most of the patients, and values up to 800 to 1000 units international unit per liter is observed in few patients. The hepatocellular pattern of the bilirubin with elevation of both conjugated and unconjugated bilirubin seen, and there is a mild increase in alkaline phosphatase and gamma globulin, and if the patient develops the cholestatic phase, then this alkaline phosphatase level may be significantly high, and similarly the prothrombin time and APTT, they are also elevated depending upon severity of the liver involvement. During acute phase, these patients, they also develop the various antibodies and autoantibodies. So antibodies to smooth muscles and other cell constitutions may also be seen, and low titers of rheumatoid factor, the antinuclear antibodies and heterophile antibodies can also be found. Another important feature are the development of antibodies to the liver, kidney, microsomal factors, but the pattern which we see in the type 2 autoimmune hepatitis is usually different as the pattern which we see in patients with acute hepatitis C virus infection. The diagnosis is usually made on the estimation of anti-SCV, and later on we confirm it with the PCR for hepatitis C virus, and in the second lecture we will discuss in detail about the diagnosis and the various limitations which are associated with the estimation of the anti-SCV. Thus, if both the anti-SCV and the RNA virus, the PCR with RNA is positive, this means the patient has got acute or chronic hepatitis C, and depending upon the clinical context. If only the anti-SCV is positive and PCR negative, then this will show a resolution of hepatitis C virus. This will be acute hepatitis C virus during the period when the viral level is very low. The anti-SCV is a non-specific test. It does not differentiate between acute and chronic, between the resolved and between the treated infections. So if the anti-SC is negative and patient is PCR positive, this is the early acute hepatitis C infections, because these antibodies usually take about 8 to 12 weeks to appear in the blood. So during the acute hepatitis, the diagnosis is made on the basis of PCR and not on the basis of anti-SCV. Or another setting where you can have a negative anti-HCV and positive PCR is the setting of chronic hepatitis C virus with immunosuppressed patients, where the antibodies, they are not formed but the PCR is positive. And if the both anti-HCV and PCR negative, this will be the absence of hepatitis C virus infection. And this is the pattern of the enzymes and antibodies, how they appear in the blood after exposure and a variable incubation period. The hepatitis C virus RNA, it appears in the blood, and this is the main test to be performed for diagnosis of acute hepatitis. The ALT level will start rising after about 2 to 4 weeks, then they will attain a peak, and usually they become normal within 6 months. The anti-HCV, usually its appearance is delayed by 8 to 12 weeks, but once it appears, then it remains in the blood throughout the life, and this will just show an exposure to hepatitis C virus. And patient who will be recovering, the RNA, it becomes absent in the blood in about 15 to 20% of the patients within 6 months, and the absence of this RNA will indicate a complete recovery from the illness. But if the patient becomes chronic, the RNA, it will persist in the blood, although level may fluctuate later on. The anti-HCV, it will again persist indefinitely, and the level of the ALT, now they may fluctuate. Sometimes the patient may have normal levels, and sometimes they may have a variable elevations. The patient is symptomatic initially, and later on most of the patients, they become asymptomatic. The various complications which can develop in patient with the hepatitis C virus, the complications, they are less severe during the acute phase as compared to hepatitis B virus. The risk of getting fulminant hepatitis is very low in patient of hepatitis C virus. And chronic hepatitis is most likely to develop when the patient gets infection during the old age. There is a longer duration of infections and advanced histological stage and grade, the more complex quasi-species diversity. There is increased level of hepatic iron, and patient also have concomitant other liver diseases like alcohol liver disease or co-infection with hepatitis B virus or hemochromatosis or alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiencies, and more importantly the presence of fatty liver disease, steatohepatitis, and co-infections with HIV and obesity. So all these factors, if they are present, the chances of getting chronic infection from acute infection, they become very high. And once the patient becomes chronic, the progression usually is very slow, but sometime depending upon the genotype, the viral load, environmental factors, and the host factors, the progression may be very rapidly, and about 20 to 30% of the patients, they will progress to the cirrhosis, and this is a slow progression. It usually takes about 20 to 30 years, and mostly this progression is rapid in patients who have got underlying fatty liver disease, they are indulging in alcohol regular use. And one of the risks of having cirrhosis is the development of hepatocellular carcinoma. The annual risk is about 1 to 4%, and usually the hepatocellular carcinoma occurs on background of chronic liver disease and cirrhosis, and usually it takes about 30 years for this hepatocellular carcinoma to develop. Then these patients, they can also have various type of extra hepatic manifestations, and this sometimes makes a prominent feature of the clinical manifestations of patient with hepatitis C virus. Various types of the extrahepatic manifestations, they include the various immune complex disease like essential mixed cryoglobulinemias, and various types of the lymphoproliferative disorders involving the beta cells. The cutaneous manifestations, they may include the vasculitis and lichen planus, the kidney involvement with membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis, sometime may be another important extrahepatic manifestations. And these patients, they can also develop various types of autoimmune disorders and various types of autoimmune antibodies. The Sjogren's syndrome is very high, and other important feature is the development of insulin resistance and even frank diabetes, and especially this association is very high with genotype 3. So thank you very much.